Catalina, Craig Smoak, and Max Olson of The Athletic. Max wrote a fantastic column, as he most of the time does, for The Athletic about most of the time. Look, I'm not gonna say they're 100%. I mean, nobody bats 1,000. Max is pretty good.
Well, you got some grievances you want to lay out? Let's hear them.
I know. No, I have.
Let's go through my list of stories, and you tell me which ones you didn't like.
No,
let's do that.
Yeah, I'm almost saying there's probably ones that you wish you could have back, like everybody does. Like, I should have put that in there. No,
just more FSU.
No, never.
More
FSU. Can't think of one. Can't ever think of one.
Yeah, but no, Max, another great column on this one on Colorado, and if the Big 12 makes sense for them, and it is such a strange issue because of everything that's happened to them since they left. Their football program has plunged into irrelevance. There's athletic department budget deficits, but you could say that about teams and conferences that make a lot of money. And I don't know if the Pac-12 that they were joining is the Pac-12 that it's obviously not, but if it's ever going to be that or if they thought it was. But in your estimation, are they trading one thing for the same thing if they leave, or would they actually be upgrading if they went to the Big 12?
Yeah, it's interesting when you look at Colorado, at least in athletics, and I know obviously you can't fully separate the academic from the athletic consideration on this if you're the leadership at Colorado, but if you look at the athletics and their experience in the Pac-12, in some ways, like Colorado is like kind of fortunate to even be in this conversation. I mean, not just because they went 1-11 last season, but I mean, if you look at their time in the Pac-12 going back to 2011, I mean that football program was 48-94, and has only had one top 25 season. They had a great year in 2016 under Mike McIntyre, but that's it in terms of like landmark seasons for them in that conference. They haven't found a way to be successful, and in fact haven't won a bowl game since 2004. So, to what degree can you like blame that on being in the wrong league versus like making not great coaching hires and things like that? Like obviously that's hard to like separate, but it's an interesting one. Obviously everyone has kind of agreed Colorado would be valuable. Expanding West would be valuable for the Big 12, and this has been on the radar ever since really last July. And I think that they have a really interesting decision to make if the Pac-12 deal is not to their liking. But would they be upgrading in a significant way by going to the Big 12? Like that's kind of in the eye of the beholder a little bit.
Max, there's the Deion Sanders factor that's been mentioned here, but as a lot of people have pointed out, I mean, it's not like he signed a lifetime contract. So do you think Colorado is as attractive at the very moment as it seems to be for the Big 12 if Deion wasn't the head coach? And how do you answer questions that would come up as far as, okay, well, if he bounces to Michigan State in 2 years, is Colorado suddenly far less valuable than it was? I mean, how big of a piece is Deion in this interest level?
I do think, just from everyone I've talked to, like I do think the Deion part is very intriguing to Brett Yormark. I think that he sees a lot of synergies there. Certainly, he's talked plenty about the Big 12, getting younger, hipper, cooler, and I think they love the opportunity there, and it gives them like real excitement about the upside of Colorado football. But you're right. I mean, this is a volatile business. Where will Deion be in 5 years? Where will Brett Yormark be in 5 years? Like it does sort of feel like short-term thinking in some ways. And obviously that's not the only positive of Colorado. I mean, you can go down the list on a bunch of reasons why it kind of makes sense that Denver's still an important TV market. And, there's been past success in the Big 12 under Gary Barnett, but I definitely get what you mean. Like it makes them hot right now. Certainly right now they're very nationally relevant. And that was the perfect hire to kind of elevate the way people look at Colorado. But, where's this program? I think we all kind of expect Colorado's probably not going to be great this season. And, if Deion Sanders is very successful, you would think he's going to move on. And if he's not, then you think he'd move on. So it's a really interesting kind of X factor in all this because it makes them sexier. But, kind of what is the trajectory there?
Max, I've of the belief that the Pac-12 will get a media deal. It may not be, again, to everybody's liking, and who knows when that'll be. I'm wondering what Colorado's internal clock is, though, when it comes to that. When you hear Rick George say things like he did last weekend, we're proud members of the Pac-12, but ultimately we have to look out for what's in the best interest of Colorado. I would, I take that to mean is that their clock on the media deal is not necessarily the Pac-12's clock on the media deal.
Yeah, that's been the thing that as this process has dragged on, and I don't think at this point, I don't think this is a matter of the Pac-12 has got a deal done and they just haven't announced it yet. I think the negotiations really are ongoing, and it's hard to know. Like, yeah, it'd be great if you had an answer by the end of June, because San Diego State kind of needs to know about being admitted into the Pac-12 by then. But I think even that I think that's a reasonable goal. But between now and Pac-12 Media Days, I feel like you got to get that thing done. And so that thing just continuing to linger, yeah, I think it creates some impatience. But I don't know that Colorado. I guess I'd be surprised if Colorado bolted before they knew what the offer was, but we certainly don't have any sense of what the timetable is here on when we're really going to get resolution.
They were really kind of damned if they did, damned if they didn't, without there being an official announcement, right? Like, for example, a few months ago, there was all this talk going on, and it was probably best to just kind of leave it as is, but then it started to bubble up and become more of a thing, and then I guess there was a need to, we got to address it, but I mean, as was pointed out in the article, you have an AD, I guess, saying, hey, we'll have it in a couple of weeks, and that was back in March. So was there any way to handle this differently, do you think, from the Pac-12's perspective? And look, everything could end up as is, and the addition of San Diego State and possibly SMU as well, and all this is just a funny thing to look back on. But is there any different way you think they could have handled this that would have made it maybe not feel as strenuous as it feels at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. Obviously, George Kliavkoff has not been out here, giving a lot of interviews and talking on the record about this process and what's going on. And, I think one thing that was probably a mistake a little bit is people getting a sense, and this doesn't come from him, but I mean, I think when you put kind of deadlines on this stuff and then you kind of blow past them, or at least people get the perception that, we're weeks away from this and then nothing happens. I think that does kind of build the tension a little bit more and certainly gives Brett Yormark and the Big 12 more ammo to pursue those schools and kind of prey on the concerns there a little bit, right? So I think in terms of the PR part, they've certainly taken a little bit of a beating on this, and they can do the victory lap obviously if they get a good enough deal and the whole league sticks together and granted rights and all that stuff. But yeah, you're right. I mean, there's not necessarily a great strategy for this when you're just kind of sitting around waiting for this thing to play out in a fashion that is probably much longer than we anticipated, even if maybe that was a little bit unrealistic on our end.
Max, do you think that George Kliavkoff isn't saying much because there's not much to say?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I think this stuff's fluid. I think especially when you're dealing with new partners and you're there's some that are standing pat at a certain number probably, and there's some that are still trying to figure out where they're at. In terms of trying to put together, and you guys did a great job interviewing Karen Brodkin yesterday, but you heard her say, even the Big 12 deal, when you're just renewing with your current partners, even that is extremely complicated to get that done. So certainly what the Pac-12 is trying to juggle here and pull this off and getting the right number, getting an acceptable setup in terms of distribution, resolving the Pac-12 network, all that stuff. I think that it's a complicated deal, and certainly if they're going to, partner with a streamer, then you're kind of working on their timetable too. So, it's a tough spot to be in.
We know that the Big 12 meetings are ongoing out in West Virginia, and I saw the quote from Kirk Bowles from Joe Castiglione, that got people kind of riled up about him walking through saying, I'm not in the room, they're talking about expansion or something along those lines. Obviously, weird transitions going on, but just of the meetings themselves, what do you know? What do you glean from the kind of the discussions going on, and how much of that do you think is geared towards this piece that we're discussing here, the expansion side, versus some of the other things that the conference is facing right now?
You're talking about the Big 12 meeting?
Yes, Big 12 meeting, sorry.
Yeah, and I'm not in West Virginia this week, so I haven't been looking in hallways and finding out what's going on there. But certainly, when you have the presidents and the ADs in one place with the commissioner, then you're going to you're going to talk through all of those options and the pros and cons and all that stuff. Some of that is kind of an extension of the Phoenix meetings they had, which was among ADs, but not presidents and board members and stuff like that. So some of it is a little bit repetitive, but as we all know, Brett Yormark also has a pretty long list of other things on his agenda too that he wants to achieve in year one here. So I'm sure that these are pretty intense meetings in terms of all the stuff they're working through. I don't think they're going to come out of those meetings saying we're adding these schools in expansion, but I guess we'll find out tomorrow. Yeah,
it's never when we think it's going to happen. So, we'll just be sitting around waiting for it like normally, Max. But the UConn's been floated out there as well. How do you feel that fits in the growth of the Big 12 if that were to come down?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of interest, and you got to remember what Brett Yormark's background is in being a basketball guy and being an East Coast guy. Like, I think he looks at UConn probably a little differently than you and I do in terms of the way that they could help you get into the New York City market. And certainly he has not been shy about having very basketball-focused ambitions here for the next TV deal and trying to potentially break that off and sell it separately and really kind of get the value that stuff is worth. And so certainly what UConn has done in men's and women's basketball is tremendous and is worth his attention, obviously. And I think them winning the national championship this year certainly piqued his interest, and I don't doubt that he went and visited there soon after that happened. And so, the football piece is interesting. That's been a really irrelevant program, but Jim Mora took over last year, gets them to a bowl game in year one. Obviously, if they came into the Big 12 in football, they're going to struggle. And I mean, it's going to be a long process to getting competitive. But certainly, I think the basketball angle and then the, kind of expanding the Big 12's reach more coast to coast and into these big markets that are important to him. I think that's certainly an angle in why he's, look at them pretty seriously.
Yeah, the message for the football fans would be like, hope you enjoyed that bowl game. Remember those things fondly for a little while because it would be uphill sled. Max, last thing before we let you go. The SEC, 8 games, 9 games. What do you think eventually, now that they've kicked the can down the road again, that will be?
Probably, I get the sense this week it seems like it's 8 in the short term, hopefully 9 long term. I think that I get the difficulties there of of not wanting to have to dump non-conference games and being concerned about how much longer these schedules are going to be here starting next year at the extended playoff and all that stuff. But I think to most people it just kind of looks like you're doing this to try to maximize your playoff spots when it's already going to be maximized for the SEC. We all know that. And I think ultimately, you want the best matchups possible. You don't want a world in which, Texas and Texas A&M aren't playing every year, right? So I think that 9's the way to go. I think that they should get on board with it, and hopefully that happens sooner than later.
Yeah, all the cool kids are doing it. Max, thanks so much. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, guys.
Max Olson of The Athletic here with us on 3.